Hello and welcome to Author Hour. I'm your host, Richard Lyntton, author of North Korea Deception, Hyde Park Deception, and Leningrad Deception. Today, I would like to welcome local award-winning author C.J. Milacci, who writes stories for teens and young adults with heart-pounding action and hope. As a referee, she is always relearning the hard lesson that it's impossible to make everyone happy, and she's discovered that stories can be found anywhere, even on a lacrosse field. She's passionate about crafting stories of good overcoming evil, finding hope in the midst of seemingly hopeless circumstances, and true acceptance. Welcome, CJ.
Thank you so much for having me, Richard. I'm
having you back.
Yes, having me back. I'm excited to be here.
Because you have been on our show already.
Yes.
And so it's wonderful to have you back. I promised you would come back for your second book. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are again, because some people may not have seen the first episode, but just tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So as you said, I'm C.J. Milacci, and I write stories typically set in a dystopian universe where the stories take place in an imagined future where America has fallen, and it's about a teen girl who gets kidnapped and forced into the life of a military recruit in the city of Talionis. And I wrote these stories because I worked with teens and young adults for many years, and I wanted to talk about how do you find hope when the circumstances in the world around you are falling apart? Because I know a lot of the kids I talk to, the young women I talk to, struggle to find hope in their lives in the circumstances that they're facing. So I wanted to write stories that kind of address that issue, but in a fun, engaging, exciting way.
Wow. What a great ambition. Beautiful goal. So, and did you, and these young women, is it to do with your church, did you tell me?
Yes. Yes. So they were young women that I mentored in my church youth group and in the young adult ministry and stuff like that.
So I understand your goal there. And by the way, I do want to just cover that reference. Can you just tell us that lacrosse reference that we had in your introduction?
Yes.
Where does that come from?
I'm a lacrosse referee as well. So I referee girls and women's lacrosse from the little girls, the youth lacrosse, all the way up to the college level.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. So, it's kind of a long way to go from, wanting to be positive and helpful to young people to going into writing a book. So, can you just speak a little bit more about that? Like, have you always wanted to write? Have you always read tons and tons and tons? Like, how did that first come about? And when did you first decide that you were really going to be a published author?
Sure. So I was not the kid who knew what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Okay.
So as a young little girl or teenager, I didn't know I wanted to be an author. It wasn't something on my mind, but I always loved stories.
Okay.
So from a young age, my parents would read to my brother and I when we were little before bed. And so I got into stories at very little. And then as a teen, I devoured books. So I always loved stories. Mm-hmm. And then when I started talking to these girls about what they were going through in their lives and then reading the books they were reading, I found so many of them didn't have hope. They felt so depressing at the end, and these girls were already depressed.
Right.
And so I just wanted to write a story that actually addressed that in some way and brought hope into the mix.
Okay.
And that's why I started writing.
So what age did you start writing?
I was in my early 20s. I forget the exact year. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And so tell me more. I really do want to know. So you just started writing chapters or ideas?
Sure. Well, I had no idea how difficult it was to write a novel. I was a little delusioned at the time. I thought, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write the story and I'll be done. When I finished, I thought that was the end.
Right.
I was so wrong. Right. So I wrote the first draft of my first story and realized how truly horrible it was, and then learned.
But wait, did you ask people, or did you yourself just decide it was truly horrible?
It was a little both. So my cousin and I had brainstormed stories.
What's her name again?
Rachel.
You give her a beautiful Rachel Jakes.
Yep.
You give it. That's like one of the nicest dedications I've ever seen. It's so beautiful. I was going to ask you about Rachel. So you gave it to her. So she literally was there at the beginning.
She was from the beginning. She still loves me and reads my books. That's a miracle. It was not good, and she was trying to be kind and like, I don't know. I think it could be better. And so that was the first clue, I guess, that was like, okay, I need to look at this more, and realized that there was a long way I needed to go in learning the craft of writing, understanding how to write a great story, and take an idea and actually craft it into something that someone could enjoy for hundreds of pages. So that's when I really dove into studying the craft, reading books on it, listening to podcasts, taking courses, etc.
I was going to say, so just walk us through some of those things, because I remember I did a writing course once, and I literally bought every book I could get on how to write. So tell us what you did.
Sure. I think one of the first books I got was Writing 21st Century Fiction by Donald Moss.
Oh, I think I read that.
Yes, it was a fantastic book. And I think by chapter 1.5, I realized, wow, there is so much I don't know. And so that really got me started in learning. And I read pretty much every book he wrote on craft after that. So kept up with him as he's published more books on it and learned so much. I took courses online, just things that how to write a good novel, how to write a story. Some things I learned a lot from, like the Donald Moss books, and others I didn't learn as much, but I think everything helped build the foundation of understanding that writing is a craft. And like any creative endeavor, you need to understand the craft in a deeper level in order to portray it in a way that can appeal to and touch the hearts of your audience. So that was kind of what started a several-year journey of me learning to write and learning to write well.
And so how long was it since you did that first draft? Just talk us through the timeline of when you literally had that first book.
So the first book that ended up becoming, the first book that I published was Recruit of Talionis. So I had written a version of that, which I think is just the seed of the idea that got planted and no longer looks anything like what it once was. And then it was, I think, probably close to 7 years of learning the craft and rewriting and writing other books, writing short stories, and then rewriting book one. Because then I looked at that again and understood for myself in an even deeper way, this book is not what it should be to be published. It is not at the level I want it to be, because I want people to get lost in my stories.
And you want it to last forever, right? Because that's the beauty about what we do. I was just in New Hope the other day and saw this amazing painting that if I could have bought it, I would have bought it. It was like this cocktail glass and this beautiful turquoise color. Anyway, it was $17,000. So we didn't buy it. But I was saying, oh man, can you imagine being an artist in selling a painting? But the beauty about our thing is that we get to sell it hundreds of tens of thousands of times, hopefully, right? But what was going to ask you? So 7 years. And then jumping forward, then what about the second book? How long did that take you?
Sure. So,
and tell us the name.
Sure. The second book is Fugitive of Talionis, and it just picks up where book one left off because of how my series kind of flows through the whole series, the story. And that one took me much less time because I've learned how to write faster and better from the beginning, although I still need all my editors and beta readers and everything. But I think that one probably was about a year in process. So I'm trying to get everything streamlined so that I can write a cleaner first draft. My first drafts are still never going to be that clean, but just so that it's less edits down the road.
Do you do scene by scene? Do you do like a plan? Tell us about that process. How do you just start writing, and then say, okay, now I'm going to go here, or do you like to have the whole book written out like in either a scene or a plan form? Tell us a little bit about that.
So that's changed over the years. I used to be completely right by the seat of my pants, kind of sit down, just start writing. And now I really have a whole outlining process that I go through. And I use a little bit of a book called Writing a Novel Using the Snowflake Method by Randy Inger Manson. And then another book called The Story Equation has an outlining process, and then Save the Cat writes a novel, has a whole thing. So I kind of took something from each of those books and made my own outline version so that before I even sit down to write that first draft, I'm figuring out the characters, where I want the story to go, the themes I want woven in, and the arcs of my characters and the plot itself, and where I want the climaxes. That is subject to change. I think once I start writing, things happen that surprise me even. And I want to let that happen. I like that part of the first draft creative process, but I still have my outline so that I have an idea of where I need to be by certain points in the story.
But that can change, right?
Exactly.
Because I find that when you've written, you've written the actual chapter, the prose, I find sometimes that you just don't want to go to the next chapter you thought you were going to go to. Do you share that outline with people? And to what extent do you change as you go along?
Sure. So I have a writing group where we will talk about that, and we'll go through.
You share your work in a writing group?
I do. Yes.
And are the other people all published authors?
In this particular one, they're hoping to be published. One is published, and the other one is almost published. So they're all in different parts of the creative process. I'm in several different writing groups. So. Wow. But yes, the other one I have is mostly published authors. And so that one I share pieces of my work and they critique it. So I'll give the introduction of the story or a part in the middle I'm struggling with. Yep. And I'll give them the certain amount of words, whatever we're doing that month. And they'll read it and discuss it. Each one will give me feedback, what they think works, what they think doesn't work.
Amazing.
And then my other writers group is a marketing mastermind kind of a group.
So how often do those groups meet?
The one I meet with multiple times a month. We try to meet weekly. I don't always get there weekly. It depends on the week. But the other group the other two groups are each once a month. And then we have Discord channels where we just add our information. We talk.
But you're reading their stuff as well.
Right. Well, so we don't in all three of those groups, we're not all reading everything. Okay. So it depends on which group it is. The marketing one, we pretty much stick to marketing and marketing copy, back cover copy. Yep. Blurbs for ads, things like that. Wow. So
the attention to detail is extraordinary. And one of the very first things I noticed about you when we met in a library, a local library, and you really stood out because your whole stand, you had a poster, it was amazing. Tell me a little bit about some of the things that people might not think of. For example, I noticed when I was looking at the back cover of your book, you've got a little icon of the first book, and you've got your award. We'll talk about that in a second. You've got your award as well, little icon. But tell us a little bit about how important attention to detail is in the marketing process. Let's talk about that.
Sure. Well, I think the details are what catch people's attention so often. So if there is the little award on the back, then it gives a little bit of that. Kind of makes them want to trust you more. Okay, this book has been vetted by somebody and they've said it was good enough to win an award. And just
tell us about the award as well.
Sure, I won two. Yeah. So Fugitive Talionis won a Young Adult Award with the Sale Awards and the Book of the Year Award. Amazing. So so it was very exciting.
Wow. Did you have was there a ceremony and everything?
There was, but I wasn't there.
Oh, right.
So one of the women in my one critique group actually received the awards for me.
So where was that?
It was in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So I didn't think I was going to win.
Oh, I see, because you didn't know.
I didn't know. I knew I had finaled. I had no idea that I would actually win the awards. I still feel like it's a surreal experience, but
that's so great. Oh my goodness.
So I think those little details, though, those are the things that catch people's eye. And so I am an indie published author, but I believe I still need to produce books that are excellent, much like yourself.
But when you say that, you say it very proudly, right? Tell me what your thoughts are, because for me it changes like almost monthly. Like things are changing so rapidly in our world. Streaming services, ability to publish your own book. Talk to me a little bit about how you feel, or have felt over the last 2 or 3 years about traditional publishing versus indie publishing. I'm sure you have lots of thoughts about that.
I do. So I like to differentiate even further. So I also like to call self-publishing its own category. Okay. Because when I think self-publishing has a very negative connotation. Yes, if someone says, I'm self-published, a lot of people will roll their eyes or not think much of it. Yes. And I think what I like to say is self-publishing is I did it all by myself. Right. So I created my own cover. I did all my own editing. I did everything I did by myself. Whereas indie publishing is I'm choosing to independently publish my novel, but I'm working with a group of professionals to make this as a professionally produced product as somebody who had a book traditionally published.
Paying them
and I'm paying them. Right. So they're subcontractors. Yeah. I've hired my cover designer. She does work for other publishing companies. So
Right.
she's got books all over the place, and I know she's worth every penny I pay her. She does a fabulous job.
She certainly is.
And so I'm willing to give her the money to produce a better quality cover than I could produce on my own.
Right.
And my editors, same thing, to go through that process.
I just have to tell you the quick story about how I found my cover, cover. I went to Barnes & Noble one Sunday afternoon and I screenshotted the cover, and then I went inside the book and I screenshotted the name of the cover designers.
Right.
And even though these were top, like, Random House, Penguin, these were all major, like it was the bestseller thing. And then I went through and I Googled each name, and most of them didn't even come up because they were sort of private or whatever. But one guy I found on LinkedIn, and I'm so thrilled that he agreed to work with me, and for not what he would charge his publishing company. But anyway, that's how I found my cover. But yes, tell us more. So tell us more about that marketing, because again, you've obviously, and you mentioned your marketing group. How important is marketing to, and give me percentages, because I would say, tell me if you agree with this. I think we mentioned this last time, maybe. There is another episode with CJ if you want to watch that as well on Author Hour. But no, tell me how you feel the percentages go on. Right, right. I say writing is 35%, marketing is 65%. What do you say?
I think that's pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And I always want the writing side to be something I can take more time to do. But in reality, in order to get your book noticed or seen or read by anybody, we need that 65% marketing to be part of what we're doing. So some weeks when I'm really in drafting mode, I might be spending more time writing. It might be more 50-50 split of my time that I can devote to my own work. But when I'm further along in that process, I know I'm preparing for a launch of a novel. Marketing definitely is taking up a greater portion of what I'm doing at that point.
Are you tempted to go back and seek a traditional route? Or do you dream of, once you've written 5 or 10 books, do you dream of an agent coming along and saying, we'll give you $100,000 to write the next book? Or do you feel like this is something that you truly believe in and want to stick with for the foreseeable future, the indie publishing?
Sure. So I love indie publishing. I think I kind of hold it all with an open hand. If someone came up or if I had a specific book that maybe was a little different than what I'm currently writing, and I thought it might do better with a publishing house, and I had an agent who wanted to shop it around, I would consider that route. I'd definitely prayerfully look at that option. But I don't say that because I'm ashamed of indie publishing, because I do love the options, the opportunities that come with
freedom,
yes, the freedom that comes with independently publishing my own work. I can do it faster. I can make sure the covers are up to my standards, because I've seen some smaller publishing houses and their covers aren't as great as what Emily produces for me, and things like that. So I think that I would very carefully consider that option, because I don't like to say never. Everything I said I'd never do, I ended up doing at some point. So, but I like to instead just continue in this road and see.
I'd love to know I never talk numbers, but I think people might be interested in numbers. So what I've heard is, if you were lucky enough as an unknown writer to get a publishing deal, they would pay you, I've heard, like $5,000 or $10,000, right? And then I think maybe before you even get that advance back, they have to sell the books. So they have to sell that amount of books, and then you get royalties on top, I think. Or maybe they give you the advance. That's right. They give you 5 or 10. But then anything after that, they have to make the advance back.
Right.
I've heard that if they really love you and really want you, and this was after a recent conversation I had with a New York literary agent who just happened to be a friend of a friend, she was saying, well, if you've got 10 or 20,000 people on your newsletter, and you've got a real following, then someone these days, and this is very recent, this is 2023, these days, post-pandemic, these days, a publisher, if they really wanted to make you the next, Stephen King, Daniel Silva, they might give you a $50,000 advance. I'm just curious, what numbers have you heard or, believe are accurate just for people, just to share? I
think what you're saying is right around what I've heard as well. Numbers never stay in my head as well as I wish they would, but that all sounds very accurate. And I think if you have the platform, you're looking at those larger advances. But for a new up and coming author, the $5,000 or $10,000, and that I believe that's really with an agent as well. And if you're coming unagented to a publishing house, that number could be even lower.
Right.
And it's very rare for a book to earn out in its advance.
Right.
So even then, that's probably all you're going to see. Right. Whereas for us, with our books, we might start slower and then increase later, and we have our backlist, and now people are coming and buying book one, and that's something that we can still be promoting. A publishing house, you've got your 30-day window of your book launch, and then after that, they're going to pull the books from the bookstores. They're going to not be as interested if it's not selling well enough. Right. Whereas for us, hey, my second book's coming out. I can promote book one. I can do a price pulse on it. I can have some fun with that marketing as well. I can bring out my new audiobook for it, all of these things that can be part of my marketing and hopefully bring people into the series and get them excited about book two.
Did you do, because I don't want to forget audio, but did you do audiobook for book one?
The audiobook for book one is the one I just finished.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. So this is fun because one of my things is I always wanted to be on Audible, and I thought, well, I've got to read it myself. A, I'm an actor, and B, I can do all the accents. So I did do it myself. Tell us about the process. How long does it take? You just mentioned before we started some interesting software that you use, but my problem was that for every hour you spend narrating, or say half an hour, you're literally spending 4 times that. If you do it yourself, this is, if you don't pay a fortune for someone else to do it, but you're literally spending 4 times that 1 hour to just edit one chapter, which was, so it took me about 3 months, I think, to make an audio. But tell us your process. Why did you just suddenly decide to do it? Why did you decide that you would do it? Tell us a little bit about the audiobook.
Sure. So I love audiobooks. I find that with my schedule, it's hard sometimes to sit down. As much as I love to sit down with a physical copy of a book, it's hard to find that time to do it. And it's usually at the end of the day and I fall asleep. So the audiobook is the way I tend to intake a lot of my reading. And
so where are you doing that? In the car?
In the car, if I'm cleaning, cooking, things that don't require as much time, or even work that is a little less brain needed. Right. I can't think of a better word for that, but yeah, so
relaxing.
Yeah, exactly. So I can just listen to the audio while I'm doing things that don't require as much focus. Yeah. And I love audiobooks, and I know a lot of people who love audiobooks. So it was always something I wanted to provide. It's a growing market in the publishing industry. Every year, audiobooks are the thing that are increasing in popularity more, especially since the pandemic. But even they thought that number would go down. That number has continued to climb because people are finding that they love audio. And it's a great way to get lost in a world, especially if you have a good narrator. So it was something I wanted to do. Hiring a great narrator is not cheap.
Right.
So
I mean, we're talking again. I want to start talking numbers more for people because I think it's interesting. But I think I've seen quotes for like, 7. Although I decided that if someone would ask me, it would cost $7,000. I would probably charge them. So I don't know what numbers you had for did you research?
I did.
What were they
research.
charging?
So usually it would be the cost per finished hour. Right. So I think an average number was around $300, but that was on the low end.
For 1 hour?
For one finished hour.
Right.
So, but my book is long. Right. I write long. So my audiobook now is over 14 hours. So I can't do that math in my head, but you see very quickly, and that would be a narrator who's starting out, someone who's not a professional. Right. You're a professional actor, so your numbers are going to be higher because you have that expertise that you're bringing, and some of these people don't. So, and I'm very picky.
Did you research on, because there's a thing on ACX, which is the Audible platform.
Sure.
Did you research some narrators to see?
I did. I researched on there and on Findaway Voices.
Okay.
So I kind of looked at both.
You obviously wanted a woman.
I did, because the protagonist in my stories is a 17-year-old girl.
Yeah. And so what happened? So you just couldn't find the right person, or it was just too expensive?
It was a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. I found some that I was like, oh, that's not bad, but I didn't love their voices, and especially when I'm thinking I'm spending thousands of dollars on this. Right. So I kind of just was like, well, let's just give it a go and see how it goes. I always make silly voices for, when I'm reading books to my nieces or nephews, and so I'm not uncomfortable having to change my voice up and change things.
Have you done any kind of recording? Because you need a proper mic, you need an interface, you need a booth. I mean, did you have all that
So
already?
I do a lot of podcast interviews as well for marketing. So I already had a lot of the equipment that I needed. So that was another piece of that puzzle, I suppose, because I didn't have to go and invest all that money.
Right.
It was already something that I already had. So I then just decided to tackle the project and see how it would go. I had a couple family members who were bugging me for it. An uncle who
bugging you for the
audiobook. So I knew there were people who really wanted it. They were like, well, I want to read your book, but I don't have time to read. So
what? Tell me the experience. What was it like? Did you discover anything new, either about your story, your writing, the characters, by reading it?
I discovered that I write too many characters. Not really. They all fit the story, but when I was trying to come up with all these different voices, I was like, oh boy. Right. But there's something about reading your book out loud that kind of brings it to life in a new way. Right. And I'm glad I got to have that experience because I found some errors that I need to go back and fix, but also just was able to enjoy the story again in a different way because I wasn't drafting, I wasn't editing, I was just reading and reading it to hopefully thinking of this audience that's going to enjoy hearing this story for the first time. Right. So kind of brought it to life in a new way for me. And it was something I did while working on Fugitive of Talionis. So that also helped because I was keeping my characters in mind. I was remembering their personalities and how they worked and how I needed them to flow into book 2 and beyond. Fantastic. So it was a great experience, exhausting, overwhelming in its own right, because it's, as you know, a long process to get to that finished product.
So how long was it for you? Just to give people a sense of the time it takes.
Sure. So
Did you do like one chapter at a time, like me?
Yeah, my chapters are relatively short, so sometimes I could do a little bit more.
Okay.
It depended on how much time I had in the day, because this was something I was fitting into my schedule and not something that was already organically a part of my schedule.
Right.
So it was here and there over months of time.
Okay,
and
so
then
several months.
Yeah.
So you didn't do it all at once.
I didn't do it all at once. Yeah. But one of the things, I use a Hindenburg narrator for my audio recording, and they have a way that you can have a favorites menu where I could keep my character voices all there. So I could save it. So I would be reading and come to a part where Laban, for example, showed up. So I could just play how I had his voice sound earlier in the story and then be like, okay, this is how I need him to sound now. Wow. And so even though there were these gaps between when I was able to record, I was able to stay in, hopefully within the same flow of the story and the same voices and all of that.
And it's Hindenburg, what is it again?
Narrator.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to try that, because it sounds like a really, really helpful way of doing it. Couple more things before we finish. I want you to tell us about this idea of, first of all, tell us what Kickstarter is. Tell us, if you know other writers who've done it, and tell us about your process and why you decide to do a Kickstarter, because you did Kickstarter for Fugitive. So have I shown this cover yet? But it's beautiful. We have a graphic for you. Fugitive of Talionis. This is coming out in October 2023. But tell us about the Kickstarter campaign and why you decided to do that.
Sure. So I use Kickstarter as a way to pre-launch my stories. So everyone who backs the Kickstarter is able to receive a copy of the book months before it releases anywhere else. So my Kickstarter backers already have Fugitive of Talionis, even though it's not available for anyone else until October.
So literally like 3-4 months before?
Exactly. Yeah, they all got it earlier in July. So.
And I mean, how many people are we talking about? Like hundreds, thousands?
Hundreds. Yeah, I think I had about 140 Kickstarter backers, which usually you have less of the backers on Kickstarter. Right. And the book will sometimes cost a little more than it does on Amazon. Okay. And there's a lot of other perks that come with Kickstarter. So it's a crowdfunding platform. Often I think Kickstarter is known for board games in that industry, but it's becoming more and more popular amongst indie authors as a way to essentially bring in sales and recoup some of what you've spent on producing your novel before it's even released. So instead of going in the red, which you typically would as an indie author, you can go in closer to the black or in the black because you've recouped a lot of those funds through the Kickstarter campaign. I
would ask you more about the Kickstarter, but I don't want to miss out on the maps, because I suddenly wanted to talk about maps, and your maps are so cool. I think we have a graphic of it. What I noticed about your maps is it has that oldie worldy feel. And then I was really looking at it, and I noticed all these tiny little place names, and I thought, and they were like hidden almost, but they were place names. And so tell us, before we've only got 1 minute, but tell us about the maps. Who did the maps for you, and what did you want from your maps?
Sure. So my map creator, his name is Chaim, and he hand drew all of the maps.
Wow.
So they're exquisite. He did an incredible job. My nephew thought I was a really good drawer at first, but it was not me.
Exactly.
And
I love that feel.
yeah, and I wanted the maps because I think a map can draw you into the story and give you an excitement for it. So he produced that and more.
Did he sort of get it first time for you?
I guess it depends on the map, but he usually will give me a preliminary drawing that's a little rough, and then we'll fill it in together. But he's excellent. He does such a fantastic job, and his attention to detail is beyond what I ever would have hoped.
Absolutely. Well, congrats. What's his name again?
Chaim. Chaim.
Well done, Chaim. CJ, we've whizzed by. I knew I wouldn't even need these questions because it's always so great talking to you. Thank you so much. If you want to find out more about CJ, you go to cjmilacci.com, correct?
Correct.
CJMILACCI, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so www.cjmilacci.com. And then finally, don't forget Leningrad Deception. My book 3 is out now. And I did also want to tell you, I'm excited about this book. It's called The High-Heeled Gardener. This is a romantic comedy set in North London. Think 4 weddings and a funeral meets the climate crisis of today. And that is also on my website. So it's The High-Heeled Gardener. And that's our very first fiction book that we've published as another author, not me. See you next time.